All right, hey everybody, thanks for joining me on this very, very super special episode of All Things Division 3 Soccer. This one might be a little bit out of my lane. I'm focusing on Division 3 soccer, but there is someone whose name has come up in a multitude of conversations I've had, in particular with Sarah Odie, the commissioner of the OAC, and Katie Boldvich, the commissioner of the Landmark Conference. As much as I love Division 3 soccer and all of the variables that go into making a successful D3 program, you can't have a successful D3 program. Well, in fact, you can't even have a D3 program if your school is failing. So, over the last year, we've seen Finlandia, Casanova, Madai, Cabrini close or announce that they're closing, and there's a number of others that are in dire straits that I think everyone has seen. So this intersection of soccer, more broadly athletics, and with the success of Division 3 are sort of, you can't escape them. They're all intertwined together. So I had this opportunity to reach out to someone who knows a lot about the subject, and I shot an email thinking I would never get a response. But lo and behold, here I am. So today, special guest that I have is Dr. Jeffrey Docking. He's the 17th president of Adrian College. In the time he's been there, he's transformed Adrian College from a struggling institution that had about 800 students to a school with about 1,800 students today. So he's so well known. He's written a book called The Crisis of Higher Education, a plan to save small liberal arts colleges in America. The link is down below if you're interested in it. It is a great read. So with that, President Docking, thank you very much for joining me today.
No, thanks for having me, Paul. I'm honored. I'm happy to be on. I look forward to talking to you.
All right. So let's just start out with this basic premise. It's 2005. You're an administrator. You're working at or you start working at Washington and Jefferson. What is it that you're seeing in the landscape of Division 3 very broadly that led you to come down to this path of coming up with a plan?
Yeah, I guess in the shortest term, I would say what I saw was Division 3 small private liberal arts colleges in particular were walking the plank. And even though they had some plank in front of them, eventually they're going to fall into the ocean. And the reason is because the business model doesn't work at some point unless you have $1 billion in the bank. And even there are colleges now with $1 billion in the bank that are hemorrhaging, and they've got to figure it out too. So what I could see real early on is that we have this absolutely amazing, beautiful Norman Rockwell painting called Small, Colleges in America, with the ivy on the walls and the small classes and the personal relationships with professors. Located in towns that really need these colleges to thrive, where kids are creating lifelong friendships and memories. And it was all going to come crashing down unless there was plate tectonic change in the future.
Yeah. So with that, let's talk a little bit about your book. What's sort of the general thesis of your book around these, I'll just call the struggling landscape of Division 3 small liberal arts colleges, where you actually mention early on that you and I didn't look at where this information comes from, but the insolvency, you call insolvency of about a third of these small schools.
Yeah, that's right. And it's probably even more than a third now. And you mentioned several in your lead, and you could throw Iowa Wesleyan there and Cardinal Stritch. I mean, they're just closing. I pulled a list a couple days ago of over 100 schools that have closed since 2018. And so the basic premise of my book was that the great thing about American higher education are the plurality of schools that kids can choose among. Some are very comfortable in classes of 600 at schools or 40 or 50,000, but there's a lot of students out there that need this kind of education to get a college degree. and yet it needs to work from the college side. And the only way it can work is if you have bodies and seats, because you don't have the kinds of endowment, or you obviously most of them are private. You're not getting Uncle Sam to write you checks every month. And so you've got to have bodies and seats. And so what would make a kid at 17 or 18 years old who has roughly 3,000 schools to choose from, when you add the big ones, the small ones, the regionals, the community colleges, why would they choose a small private liberal arts school? And if you get into the head of an 18-year-old, I believed, and this is fortunately proven out to be true, that yes, many of them want to get a college degree. They wouldn't be here if they want to get a college degree. That's foremost important to them. But they want to do something in addition to that they absolutely love and want to do 4 years beyond high school. And often that's sports. It doesn't have to be sports. I mean, it can be student newspaper. It can be the marching band. But they want to do something, and they can't do it at the bigger schools. They can do it at these types of schools. And so that was the basic premise, that you can grow and grow fast by appealing to the co-curricular loves that students have.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the marching band thing, and I was intrigued when you talked about the marching band at Adrian and how you use it as a vehicle to bring in these kids who otherwise maybe they would be, but wouldn't get recruited to come to a school to play in the marching band, and the growth that you saw in the numbers in the band. One of the things you mentioned that I thought was interesting, almost a little bit to backtrack, is that you said small schools are not in competition with each other. Could you just sort of elaborate on that? Because that was the one thing that stuck. I'm soccer, right? So everything I do is soccer. Everything is competitive. There's a winner, there's a loser. We won a national, and that's the first time I ever thought that there was someone say Mount Union is not in competition with Adrian, right? So.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you are a soccer guy. I've watched some of your videos, and I'm a hockey guy, and I'm an incredibly competitive person myself. But when I sat back and looked at the data, what I learned was that 85% of the kids that go to college from high school go to the large universities, the Michigan States, the Michigans, et cetera, et cetera. And so we needed to bite into that part of the pie. We needed to take a bite out of the 85%. We can do that without, stealing 3 kids from, Mount Union. And if Mount Union's going to crumble because we get 3 soccer players that you thought you were going to get, then we're both in trouble. The big piece of the pie is the big publics, and there's so many students at the big publics that need this kind of education, and they just can't get it there, and so they should go to our type of school. So that's who this goes after. I make no bones about the fact that I'm trying to get 25 kids from Michigan State. If I get 25 kids from Michigan State, that's the difference between red ink and black ink in my freshman class.
Yeah. Wow. I never thought of that. I just thought it was a different world, right? And having seen personal experience now that my eyes are a little bit open, there are kids that I know that go to these big schools that they're not happy. It's almost like a transaction at that point for them, which is sad because I think the college experience is so much more like that. And if they had gone to a smaller school, that their experience would be so much better. All right, so maybe you could walk through a little bit. Athletics is a core component in what you call, this. I'll just say this first phase of your admissions growth model, which is right. Like, how do we get kids enrolled in our school? More numbers, and so maybe you could talk a little bit about that. The importance of athletics. I mean, one of the first things you did was to build a football stadium, which talk a little bit about, but I'm just maybe you could just sort of walk through why athletics, why I should probably broaden that term, right? Like why extracurricular activities are so big in this process of enrolling more students.
Yeah. So, it's really a three-legged stool, the success of this model, which I'll explain second. The first thing I just want to say is everybody who's lived in America for more than just a few years knows how important athletics is. When I made a decision to push this model at Adrian, one of the reasons why I did it was I was watching an Alabama, this is a true story. I was watching an Alabama football game. It was October. It was like a Saturday night, playing big rivalry down there. And some guy my age basically pulled open his shirt and he had one of those big red or crimson Alabama A's on it for national TV. And I thought, holy smokes, the passion with which people feel about, for some guy my age to show his chest on national TV is frightening. So, so I thought you can leverage this for good. And so essentially what the model depends on is three things. First is you've got to have good facilities for kids to look at. Facilities speak to students. A lot of these kids are coming from high schools with beautiful facilities. So you can't say, look, if you come to Adrian, you're going to get a great education, you're going to get a great experience on the athletic field, the rink, the track, the diamond, whatever. You can't do that if the kid's looking at the baseball field down at the corner park that still has rocks on it from, the last Little League game, or the track over at the local middle school that's really worn out that you run. You've got to have good facilities. So we put $30 million into facilities here. I've raised $15 million. They borrowed $15 million here at the college, and that got us great facilities. Now, this is in 2005, 6, 7. You can get a lot for $30 million back then. The second leg of this stool, though, that you need is you need a full-time coach that understands the sport. So I'll pick your sport. You can't say, excuse me, Paul. You can't say, we've never had soccer, but soccer's a great game. So let's start men's and women's soccer. Oh, and by the way, we've got a chemistry teacher that played soccer 15 years ago and still kind of loves it. So we're going to say, hey, if we throw $4,000 at you, will you coach soccer when your classes are over? And there's schools that try to do this.
Yeah.
And the kids realize, hey, this, plus a chemistry teacher doesn't have time to recruit. And that's ultimately what this boils down to. And so they realize the school isn't taking it seriously. So you've got to have full-time coaches, great facilities and full-time coaches. But the third leg of the stool is that you've got to support it with sort of game day travel costs so that the kid doesn't say, okay, we got a soccer team, we got a full-time coach, we're going to play at Mount Union, it's 3 hours away. And, the administration just said, find somebody with a couple of old cars that can drive you over there because we don't have money for buses. Oh, and by the way, you're on your own when you're coming home and you're hungry. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So how it does work is if you put some money into the sport, treat it right, you got the facilities, you got the coach, you got the program costs, it ends up being a win for everybody because the kid has a great experience at, high level. And I maintain Division III is very high level. I don't know if the general public. Oh,
totally
high
agree.
level.
Totally agree.
Tight pyramid at that level.
Yep.
The kid that's 6'1" plays wide receiver for us. The kid that's 6'6" plays up the road at the U of M.
Yep.
But they're both great athletes.
Yeah. I agree.
And yet with the non-scholarship, Division III, the kid is paying tuition, room, board fees, buying swag at the bookstore and putting money into the campus and other education. You come out way ahead as an institution.
Yeah. I saw a lot of the numbers that you were doing. If you bring in 8 kids, and correct me if I'm wrong, your full-time coaches become drivers of that enrollment and recruiting players. And I'm assuming they have some sort of quota-ish thing where they say, like, we expect you to get 10 kids, 20 kids, whatever the program is. Is that accurate? Did I read that?
You got it. And we don't over recruit. So what we say to every coach is, let's take hockey. I don't know what the ideal number is on a soccer team, your sport, but for a hockey team, let's say the ideal number is 28 kids. Mm-hmm. Okay. You got your regular 4 lines, your defensemen, your 2 or 3 goalies. You want some extra kids in case someone gets hurt. 28 kids. So when coaches come in to interview, I tell them, you got to maintain a roster of 28. Mm-hmm. And I hope you win. I want the kids to have a good experience. I They got to get kids that can perform in the classroom, but I need bodies. And if 7 kids graduate, you need 7 the next year, maybe even 8 or 9, assuming a couple will quit. So everybody knows exactly what the number is. And it's like the scoreboard in the basketball arena.
Yeah.
You either win or lose at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And occasionally, like, track is an amazing sport for this model because there's no limit.
You can have
Get
as
6
many.
shot putters.
Yeah.
So we brought in a coach many years ago now that brought like 1 or 2 kids in over the course of a year.
Mhm.
We said it's not going to work. There's accountability in this.
Yeah.
Your number was, I don't know what his number was now, probably 10.
Yeah.
Brought 2, doesn't work.
Yeah.
But every single Monday, for every single sport that we have here, I get a listing of, men's soccer, how many kids put in applications, how many were accepted, and then how many paid their deposit to come here.
Yeah.
And we monitor it.
What's interesting too from the book is, and it's something that I don't hear very often, especially talking to the coaches, right? Where you don't talk about funding these activities for coaches. You talk about fully funding, right? Which is it's a big difference. If you say, hey, we need you to recruit. Oh, and here's $200 for your recruiting budget. It sounds like to make this work, you have to make a financial commitment that probably in the early stages of Adrian, people were like, oh my gosh, are we going overboard? Are we spending too much money?
100%. The first time that I broached this to my board of trustees, which would have been October 2005, I said, good news, bad news. Good news, I've got a plan. Bad news, it's very expensive. Mm-hmm. And I think my first year I got there, they said, well, we're going to lose about $1.3 million this year. And I only been there about a month or two. And they said, we're going to have red ink. And I said, if you think you've got a deficit now, next year you're going to lose about twice that, because I've got to go out and borrow money, and I got to hire coaches a year before they put somebody on the field.
Yeah.
Right? You can't hire them in August and say, give me a soccer team in September.
Yeah.
And so they did. We lost over $2 million. But the way the business model works is once they start bringing in the kids, if you bring in 20 kids for lacrosse, a sport we started back then, now we make about $25,000 a kid per year, tuition, room, board, fees. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it all works out. And then you can take that money, because we're not an Olympic Village. We are an educational institution, right? And you can start to put it towards a new science building, which we've built, a new business building, which we've built, a new language arts buildings, which we built, new music facilities. And you can truly redo your campus on the academic side through leveraging of the athletics that we've been talking about.
Which again was interesting, because one of the things I wanted to ask you is, I'm sure there was a lot of pushback in 2005 when you presented this all. There had to have been from the academic side, because your first focus is on the part of the school that, right, I don't want to say is in conflict with, but oftentimes you see schools where you have your athletics is almost separate from the academic mission, and they don't see eye to eye. So how did you deal with that any sort of reluctance to go your way?
I dealt with it, Paul, through 3 or 4 different ways. The first way that I did it was that I was incredibly transparent about what was going on. In fact, I said to the faculty straight up, you're going to see millions of dollars getting spent, bulldozers pushing, dirt, backhoes digging holes, people coming in, laying brick, all this. And I said, and you're not going to see any of it on your side of the street.
That's transparent.
Right? And I said, but if you can give me 5 years to grow this school with good kids, with athletes that are determined inside and outside the classroom, you will see a transformative change in the kinds of kids that we get and their ability to do good academic work. So I was very transparent. put it straight out there to him. Secondly, as I said, I got here in July and I said, we're going to start this model in earnest in 6 months. No, this is my idea that we use this model. And I said, I'm going to broach it to everybody at the same time. I went to a big hotel not too far from here. I got all the faculty, all the administrators, I had custodians in the room. I had secretaries in the room, a couple students. And I said, this is the plan. It's the only plan I have. If you've got a better plan, my door's open and I'm willing to listen. But in 6 months, we're going to hit the go button, which was January,
Right.
of 06. No one darkened my door. No one had another plan. So that was the plan we used.
Yeah. That's interesting. It is a key component to this, and I thought was, again, interesting. I don't, it's because I'm so focused, but I didn't have it in my head. Like, all of this ultimately is to drive, you drive enrollment, which means you drive revenue, which means this becomes how you fund everything else, right? And I thought one of the things that that was revealing to me is that, and I think you made reference to it in the book, was kids don't necessarily go to a small school because the history department's really good. I mean, that helps, don't get me wrong, but that's not a main driver for enrollment, right? And yeah, so that I thought was interesting. Let me ask you, all right, so this is, you begin in 2005, right? Well, 2006. You wrote the book in 2015. Do you think anything has fundamentally changed in the landscape that you're looking at, or do you still say the same problems that small schools faced in 2005 still remain today, or maybe even are more pronounced now?
Yeah, unfortunately, what has changed is that things have gotten much worse
Okay.
on a lot of different fronts. First of all, just the finances have gotten worse with schools. It's tougher. Things have gotten more expensive. It's gotten worse with respect to the demographic cliff.
Mm-hmm.
'05 and '06 was before '07 and '08 and '09, when the world sort of ended as we know it with the Great Recession, and people stopped having babies
Mm-hmm.
around then. And so when you look at, for example, my understanding is Michigan's going to be down 15% in high school graduates. And so you've got fewer kids to choose from. Now you've got competition with boot camps and coding camps and all these different ways to try to set yourself up for a good life professionally without having to get a college degree. You've got a real drop off in families that are confident in colleges and universities. Either they don't know if it's worth it, they don't want their kids to have the debt, they're worried that they're too politicized,
Yeah.
and on and on and on. So it's bad, man. It's a tough time, and so I didn't get the question I often get is sort of why did I share the secrets to the sauce, or the secret recipe to Coke or whatever? Because what I have found in higher ed is a lot of people will come up with ideas that can help their institution, but they keep their cards like this because they're afraid somebody will copy it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't get bit with the bug that my school matters and yours doesn't, or my kids matter and yours don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think all these schools matter and all these kids matter. And like I said earlier in the interview, I think we can get a lot of kids that want this kind of education and just don't know it.
Yeah.
And so by sharing the secrets to the sauce, so to speak, and having a lot of schools now do this, I think it's been good, for the entire sector,
Mm-hmm.
certainly for families.
That's a interesting point you raised. I was, as I was reading this, you talked a lot about, people don't realize a lot of these schools started as a town, like the town started at the same time as the school, the college, these small schools, right? And so they're intertwined with the community. And so removing a school, you could conceivably kill a community. And I never, again, sort of thought about it. I just remember my days at Mount Union. There was for a while there, you used to go to a store and you would get as change instead of, a $10 bill, they would give you five $2 bills. And the story is that Mount Union paid employees with $2 bills so that they would circulate it in town and they could see how impactful the I don't know if that was true. It sounds a little sketchy now that I'm 54 years old, but at the time, as when I was 18, I was struck by that. And so these communities are they survive based on the success of a school. So I could see why you would say, hey, it's not just a competitive thing, right? Like, I'm not just keeping it for Adrian. It's all schools need this sort of help. So can you just talk a little? You mentioned somebody in the book who you said was integral, Rick Crehan. Did I?
Mm-hmm.
Could you just talk about him? He was sort of the other mind, I think, that sort of helped you organize these thoughts originally. Is that accurate?
That is right. So I was the vice president for student affairs and ultimately assistant to the president at Washington and Jefferson College, which is just south of Pittsburgh, great little school, 11th oldest college in the country.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know it from your Mount Union days.
Yeah.
And after I'd been there a number of years, I hired a guy as an athletic director. His name was Rick Crehan. He had been at Allegheny College. And he, as I say early in the book, really sort of both codified much of my thinking around this model that we're talking about, but also expanded upon it. And so he and I started working together with him as the athletic director at W&J and me, essentially in the vice president's office to put this together at W&J. Well, there was a change in leadership at W&J. It was time for me to get kicked out of the nest and get a presidency here. And Rick said to me, look, I will commute to Adrian, Michigan, because we've never been able to put this model fully into place. And we always had, other dynamics that we had to deal with. We did some of it at W&J. He did some of it at Allegheny, but never full force. Mm-hmm. So he commuted every week from Pittsburgh to Michigan over 4 hours, driving door to door.
Wow.
I know. He's a grinder. Good guy too. And he was my executive VP. And I told him, buddy, for the next couple of years, I got to be raising money like a wild man to pay my $15 million to, this project. You basically helped me build the facilities and run the campus. So that's what we did. He was extremely helpful. He went on after this to become a president in another place. And I obviously have continued to expand on the model. So we've gone from 16 teams, believe it or not, at Adrian that we recruit for to 50. We have 50 teams that we recruit for now. About 70% of our kids are coming as athletes.
Can I just tell you my favorite sport that I saw that is listed, which I was shocked to see, was cornhole. You have a varsity cornhole team.
ESPN, man, national championship last year. Throwing the beanbag in the hole.
Oh my gosh!
With my wife.
I am just making an announcement now. I am ditching the whole soccer thing, and I'm doing Division III cornhole from now on.
It's easier for guys our age, man. And I know I'm older than you, you can get hurt running into that goalpost at a soccer game.
Yeah. I need something easier. This I could do. I could do that.
Just the underhand beanbag, man.
Yeah, that's hysterical. That's funny. Hey, I did want to. I laughed. I mean, I thought it was almost funny because as I was going through this list of things, I kept like, oh, that college just did that. That you have a list of 8 strategies that fail, and rebranding, adding satellite campuses, the investing in online education, the trade schools, building new academic facilities. I'm assuming just building the academic facility before you have the model for enrollment, right? The admissions growth model. Library holdings, publicizing faculty research, which I thought that probably, that made me chuckle. And then manufacturing fun, so trips and whatnot. the one I wanted to ask you about is the investing in online education. Since COVID, that has that made you reconsider that at all, or do you still think it's a failed strategy if that's what you're using to grow enrollment so that you could pay your bills?
No, I have changed 180 on that one. Out of the eight that I list, that's the one that I've totally taken back.
Mm-hmm.
And you're exactly right. I probably have egg on my face when it comes to that one because in 2015, I felt like online education was poorly done.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like it was much better than somebody who could put together a PowerPoint deck of slides
Yeah.
and then say, this is a class. And so here's slide 13, 14,
Yeah.
72, 73. And I wasn't seeing the results in terms of the output that kids that were getting online education, including, the University of Phoenix and some of
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
other early online educators, were pushing out kids that were getting successful careers going.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically dumped on it and
Mm-hmm.
said, no good. Don't turn that way. That's not our brand. That's not who we are. Let's just stay with the face to face. What has changed since then is exactly what you've said. Number one, COVID
Mm-hmm.
made everybody realize, hey, there's a way to do this that's better.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in a hybrid format, not
Yeah.
totally online, but going to these small schools and having some of your education
Yeah.
online. And frankly, the technology around it has gotten
Got
much better. It's
much
become much
better,
more,
much
oh,
much
much better,
better.
much more interactive.
Yep.
Um, maybe this is probably for another day, but we've taken what you've been talking about with the athletic model and done it on the academic side with another initiative that we started here called RISE, RIZE, which has
Mm-hmm.
allowed us to start 24 new academic programs over the last 2 years, two new
Wow.
majors in cybersecurity and all the,
Wow.
supply
Yeah.
chain
Yeah.
management.
Yeah.
I won't get into it too deep because that's not
Yeah.
why we're here. But my point is, some of this is in a hybrid online format, which has really, really been successful.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I do take that back to an extent, but if I don't take it back in terms of saying, oh, Adrian's just going to go all online and we'll be
Yeah.
the
No.
same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No
Yeah.
way.
Um, it's like I said. I think I laughed. That was the only one where I was like, I wonder if you would pull that one back just
Take
because.
it
But
back,
everything
man.
else, adding the satellite campuses, I've seen a lot. The rebranding always makes me chuckle, right? Like as if that's the panacea. But um, how many new academic buildings have you been able to either build or restore at Adrian since 2005 ish?
Every single one.
Wow.
I just finished a $5.5 million art gallery, which was the last building that we needed to do. We had a building that was, built in the mid '60s that was
Yeah.
really dated and, original windows and all that. And we really redid the whole building and added a big extension with an art gallery. So yeah, the whole academic scene has been redone here from science to business to, as I said earlier, languages, music, the whole bit. Even our
Um,
chapel's redone.
yeah. That's amazing. In relatively short amount of time, right? Like that you're able to do that. I, can we go back to the marching band because I was so intrigued by that? Maybe because I knew a bunch of band people who were like committed band people, like unlike anything else. But th- was that like the shining example for you? Like, man, if we could do this with the band, could you imagine if you could do it with other things? Was it that eye opening to you, or was it just a numbers thing?
No, it was what you're saying. And numbers obviously was a part of it too, but I'm glad you picked out marching band because the reason I love marching band is multiple. First of all, it's music. It's more
Mm-hmm.
academic. It's not sports, and yet it's this almost team feel, team orientation, and it really sort of gets to, as we said, the mindset of an 18-year-old. And I wasn't in the marching band; it wasn't my thing in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But as I would watch kids in the marching band, they loved it. Their
Yeah.
parents were taking them to
Ah.
lessons. They were waiting around after games to watch the band come on the
Yeah.
field. It was their interest group. They were bonding around all kinds of things related to making great music. It was
Yep.
tough. In September, October, when it's 95 degrees out, you're out there, marching and practicing. And it's a fantastic thing. Those kids end up doing better in the classroom. You can start to look at how kids do academically versus other subgroups on campus. Kids in the marching band are often your pre-med students.
Yeah.
Music and science go very closely together.
Yeah.
But I'll give you another example of why it's so good for a school like this. We got a little school right up the road that I know you've heard of that gets 112,000 people at their football games every Saturday, called the University of Michigan. And I was in our admissions house. This is like 15 years ago. And a kid came in with his mom and dad, and the admissions counselor's talking to the kid. And he goes, "Well, I'm looking at two schools. My grades have been good. I'm looking at Michigan and I'm looking at Adrian. I don't know if I want to go big or small. And I really want to be in the marching band." And the admissions counselor went, "Whoa. Have you talked to the conductor up at Michigan about that?" And the student said, "No." And he said, "Because it may be easier to play on the football team up there than it is to play in the marching band. It's competitive.
It's competitive. Yeah.
And all that."
Yeah.
And he said, "If you want to be in the marching band, I'll take you to the conductor's office here right now. You can talk to him. And oh, by the way, you got a spot in the band. We don't cut. You want to be in the band, you're in the band." Mm-hmm. So that's really the model, really a base level. And the kid ended up coming here and having 4 great years academically and being in the marching band. Yeah. And look at, I love the University of Michigan, right? But they, it's just a different animal up there. It's apples and oranges. And they would say that too.
Yeah. That's interesting. It is true at that level, Michigan's, right? Like, so it is as close to being a professional athlete. Probably more. I gotta believe it's more complicated than just being, a soccer player running out there kicking the ball, right? Because there's so much that goes into it. It's not just and you train like an athlete. Those guys are out there as long as anybody else is. Trained.
That's right.
So
that's right.
President Docking, let me ask you, like, what is your end game at Adrian? You went from 800 to your original goal was 1,400. I forget the exact numbers, but 1,400. Yeah. You're now at 1,800 or 1,850. I can't remember. Like, what's your end game, or where do you want to get to from a student population size where you could be like, we are now set, which I think is probably in a lot of respects a bad thing, because you don't want to be set. You want to keep moving forward. But is there an end state where you think Adrian needs to be at this number going forward?
There is, Paul, and that number for us is roughly 2,000. Mm-hmm. Because what happens at 2,000 for us is that then we need to build another cafeteria. We need to build more dormitories.
Yeah.
We need to go on another building campaign. And so that becomes very expensive. But to believe it or not, our end game, and we're building something that we call the College of the Future here. That's what we talk about every day. What's the College of the Future? Mm-hmm. And the College of the Future for us is a school of 2,000 with all of these activities. But that actually, when a kid enrolls every year, he or she is guaranteed that the cost of college will go down every year. That will, instead of, this year it's going up 3% or 4% or 2%, it's that your most expensive day is your first day. And that we be the first college and ultimately the first sector, because there's a sector-wide interest in this, to lower costs for students. Mm-hmm. And so we feel like we're going to be able to do this through combining, what's going on by bringing in kids on the athletic side, with what I mentioned earlier, through this shared arrangement of classes and new majors that allow all these kids to come in for, technology majors and healthcare majors and business majors, but you're not having to hire additional faculty and personnel. And so you're not adding costs while you're bringing in kids. It's something for another day. But until we realize that you got to drive down the cost of education, it's still going to be out of reach for too many kids.
Yeah. Wow, that's the first time I heard that is an objective of anywhere, schools or Adrian. Like I as a parent who is currently paying for 2 at private schools. That's music to my ears. I'd ship my kid off to Adrian from New Jersey if it was going down. Like that's where you're going. It, the um, if we could go to talk about something that really intrigues me, and I'm being cognizant of your time, so maybe this is the last question. Um, you you actually talk about part of the school where you mention the notion of you want people to, I don't know if it's you want to people to come on, but you want to for people to come onto campus and realize, one, there's a parking problem, two, that they have to drive slow because there's a lot of people, um, and that the lawns are mowed and the flower beds are full and fragrant. Could you just talk a little bit about that? Just because I'm not kidding you, that is those are the things that I do. I think you've seen these fields of dreams. I do. I sort of, just as a complete nerd, walking around, taking pictures and talking about what I'm seeing. And it's the thing I notice: the immaculate schools with the great facilities, and parking is a issue. Could you just talk a little bit about that and what it means for the community, what it means for the environment of the school?
Yeah, I'll talk about it from a couple of different perspectives. You know, if you read about students these days, something like 80 to 85% of students choose the college that they're going to go to within 12 minutes after getting out of their car. So at that age, they get out,
Yeah.
they look around, it feels right, they feel at home, they love it. Mom and dad, this is where I'm going. Okay, we can do the tour, we can talk to the profs, we can sit in class. 12 minutes. And most, by the way, can't even fully articulate why they chose that school, even 20 years out. It's usually if it just felt right. So the point is, with that, curb appeal matters. But in the larger sense, I think from an educational standpoint, what we're trying to do with these young people is surround them with excellence. Surround them with people who dress professionally. So I tell my staff, you're wearing a tie to work. You're not going to play noon basketball and then meet people and families and turn around campus while you're still sweating. We have flowers everywhere. It's like painting a room. The flowers are cheap. You know, a bucket of
Oh
paint,
yeah.
25 bucks, whatever.
Yeah.
Flowers, you know, I don't know what, a flat of flowers costs, but not much. We have flowers everywhere. We not only mow the lawns, we edge them. We pay close attention to excellence because we want students to go, you know what? I want to up my game here.
Yeah.
I want to be better than I thought that I could be.
Yeah.
And if you can get that into a kid at this age, this impressionable age, then when they get that job interview, they're not walking in, with the backwards baseball cap. They're not walking in, using language
Yeah.
that they shouldn't be using.
Yeah.
And then they start realizing, hey, to really grow and be successful in this world, you got to overperform.
Yeah.
You got to work harder than the last guy. Tom Izzo taught my leadership class a couple years ago. He goes, you know what? I was never the best looking guy. I'm from the UP of Michigan. He goes, I was never the best X's and O's guys. He goes, pretty good recruiter, but there's one thing that separates me from everybody else, as far as I'm concerned. This is Tom Izzo to my class. Nobody will outwork me.
Yeah.
I'll outwork everybody.
Yeah.
And I was locked in on that, and so was my class, because at the end of the day, outwork and attitude is it all, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to that, but yeah, we pay a lot of attention to facilities and the look of campus and the ivy on the walls and, all of it. And it all matters.
Yeah. Like I said, I notice those schools, like the ones that I used to mow lawns during college, right? Like that was, I think a lot of people did at that time back in the day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I noticed things like edged sidewalks. Like as bizarre as that is, and it does set my impression of the school right off the bat without even like, oh, they edge the sidewalks. Oh, maybe this will be interesting, right? And if they don't, yeah, I'm not sure they care as much, right? Like it's just a thing. So
That's the perfect analogy. In my opinion, what it says is, wow, if they care about no bubble gum on the sidewalks
Yeah.
and that the lawns are edged, then they probably also care about the quality of their biology
Yeah.
classes
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whether history is being taught in the right
Yeah.
way. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. President Docking, hey, this was outstanding. I'm really appreciative of you taking the time. I'm not kidding. I was nervous this whole time. I was reading the book. I'm so excited, and the fact that you actually were more than willing to participate, I'm really grateful for, and I wish you continued success. I'm gonna reach out to the soccer coaches. I think the men's coach is new.
Yeah,
So
in a rough year, but hopefully
yeah,
we'll get on the right road here. But no,
yeah.
I'm really honored that you would ask me to do this. Happy to do it. If you want to do a follow up someday,
Oh,
obviously
definitely.
call me
Yeah,
back. But
yeah.
you can tell you're a good man, and I
Oh,
hope
thank
your
you.
audience enjoys this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right.
All right, man. See you later.
See ya.